There we go, unmuted. Gwyn, thank you so much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor sharing part of my life with you and the journeys we've both been through. And I'm so grateful for your wisdom and the times that we have spent together. And I'm eternally grateful for the critical times in my life where I just needed that one conversation to just share a simple idea with me and just change so often the course of my life, just a single conversation. And I'll talk about some of that during this talk today on just how simple ideas sometimes can be so powerful. And during my talk, please feel free, if you've got a question that's related to what I'm talking about, go ahead and, if it's something you would like to talk, together about, unmute yourself and share your question. Otherwise, if there's some questions that do come up that you'd like to chat about during the end of the talk, just put that within the chat and we can discuss those after I've spoken. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So sometimes you have to cut off your legs to fly. So this, I'll come back to a little bit later on in my talk, but it is like a caterpillar that's going through a cocoon phase. During the early part of its life, it's spending all of its time eating leaves in the sunshine and eating leaves. And eventually it gets to a stage where it starts building a cocoon and goes into total darkness. And it doesn't know what the next phase is that the cocoon is, that caterpillar is going to be going through. But it does trust and it doesn't stop the process. And it emerges out as a butterfly to live a whole different existence. And that sometimes is the events that take place in our lives, where you've got to go through dramatic change like that to completely change the course of your life and really step into and embrace the wings that were always destined to be part of who you are. There's a beautiful Chinese proverb about a farmer who loses his favorite horse. It runs away. And all the villagers come up to the farmer's house and said, "I'm really sorry that your horse has run away." And the farmer says, "Maybe." The very next day, the horse returns with 7 other horses. And all the villagers come around and say, "You must be so happy that you've now got all of these new horses." And the farmer says, "Maybe." And the next day, the son is training one of the horses to ride it, falls off and breaks his leg. And the villagers said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that your son broke his leg." And he says, "Maybe." Later on that week, the army conscription office comes around to recruit his son. But because he's got a broken leg, they're unable to recruit him. And all the villagers come around, you say, "Oh, you must be so grateful and happy that your son was not recruited." And the farmer says, "Maybe." And this very much is life and how I've experienced life and so many other people that I've spoken to, that it could be a job that they're wanting a raise or they don't want to lose the job, or a company or a relationship. And that's kind of like the horse that's run away. But often if you project forward or you ask them about the story of their life, and they will tell you about the job that they lost, the company that failed, relationship that failed, and all the good that came with that. And that's pretty much how life, it's such an important lesson that it's so simple, that proverb, but has served me so often within my life. I'd like to share with you some fears in life. And a huge one, if you look at a list of the top 3 fears, and it's a fear of death, of fear of public speaking, and a fear of, there are so many others. Fear of heights is a major one. But if you really dig deep, there are some other deeper fears that I know that I had, and that was becoming homeless, losing my family, losing my kids, having no money and not knowing where that source of income is. And those are very real fears that life gave me a beautiful gift of of having to experience all of those firsthand. I'd like to share with you part of the story and how I ended up in this forest and where my journey took me to from here. So the first time that I'm sharing this story with a group of people. I've shared it one-on-one personally with some people that I've got to know very well. And I've recorded a video for a larger project that I'm busy working on. But I feel honored today to be able to share this all with you today. And we'll see where this story takes us. I was married for about 10 years. And during that time, I had two beautiful sons. And I followed the usual pathway in life of early parts of my life, studying mechanical engineering to having the house and business and all the rest of that. But life just didn't work out of the first stages of my life with this marriage. I ended up getting separated and then divorced. And everything seemed fine. It was an amicable divorce. And for a couple of years, everything was okay. I still got to see my sons. They would come around and spend 3 days a week with me. And I was kind of rebuilding my life after that. I found like a new lease on my life during this time period. And I had taken some time to start discovering who I was after the divorce. And as part of that discovering process, I met a girl that was from another country. And we dated for probably about 6 or 7 months. And I then felt the time was right to introduce her to my two sons. And I thought that this would be welcomed, which it was. And my ex-wife was incredible at the first introduction, buying her flowers and just welcoming her to my boys' lives. And everything seemed to go well for the first probably 5 or 6 months. And it was coming up to a stage where I decided that it would be good for her to move into my apartment since her lease was coming up. And that was going to take place in September. And the time round about then was round about May or June. And sharing that news with my sons was the start of just things started falling apart. And my boys, I think, maybe struggled with the idea of having a potential stepmother. And at the time, they were 9 and 12 years old. And I don't think that they clearly showed that they weren't happy with this. And I've just thought, they're two young boys, over time, they'll get used to this. But that is not how things took place. It started getting worse and worse and worse and worse, leading up to the months before that she moved in, that they would no longer want to see me if my girlfriend was there. And I, as the adult, thought, well, what do my kids know? They're only young kids. I can't, every time that I was going to see them, just send my girlfriend away. And so I stuck true to my belief. And if they didn't want to, if they stuck to that, I said, okay, well, maybe next weekend we'll see each other. And leading up to the day that my girlfriend moved into the apartment, I might have seen them a handful of times. And there's 1 or 2 times that I did buckle and did just see them because I was so desperate to see them during that time. The day that she moved in would be the last time that I'd see my two sons for a period of over 3 years. And that just sent me into a downward spiral, a terrible downward spiral for that first year where my health was so affected through this that anything that I'd eat and drink, I'll just receive such incredible pains in my stomach to the point that I ended up being rushed off to a hospital, and I experienced turning 40 years old holding onto an X-ray machine. And my income was affected, my business, I could barely focus on that. My relationships, clearly with my 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 ex-wife and many people around me couldn't understand what I was going through, and I also just went through a very introverted stage because I was in a very unhealthy place. And so everything was spiraling down and down and down. Card failed on me, laptop failed, down to 40 pounds, and in my reaching the maximum overdraft of my life. And I realized I had to make a significant change in my life. And whatever I tried just was not working to try and get my kids back into my life. And I remember going for a coffee. It was actually an evening time. I met up with Gwyn, and it was a couple of months into this ordeal that I was going through. And I said to him, Gwyn, I don't understand why my kids are so angry still. I just thought by now that they would have got used to this and they would miss me so much and they would want to see me. But they just don't want to see me. They're so incredibly angry with me through the decisions that I've made and just being, I guess, so stubborn with my holding true to my course, my beliefs. And I said, I don't know what to do. They should be spending the weekend with me and coming around in the next couple of minutes to see me, but they don't want to see me. And he turned to me and said, Garry, what is the gift in this situation? And I'm like, what do you mean, what is the gift in this situation? And then I realized, what am I going to do with this time that I'd normally see my sons? The 3 days that I'd spend with them, cooking and preparing dinners and taking them on different adventures and putting them to bed and wrestling with them, doing all the things that dads do with their kids. And I realized I need to make use of this time in a far better way than I was just obsessing about it and the downward spiral that I was on. And so that very next day, I went for a run, and it was a plan that to run for about a mile, about 1.5 kilometers. But I maybe only got a quarter of the way there before having to stop out of such acid in my throat. Just my body was not used to this, and it was such a shock to my system. But eventually I finished that mile, and every day I continued running. And eventually I was able to run for 40 minutes, sometimes an hour without stopping. My food, I started improving. The toxic food that I used to have, and the occasional beers and sugar, and just started eating healthily and removed many other toxins out of my life, including a lot of toxic people. And so it was at the start of an upward spiral in my life. And life was just calling me more and more to do more difficult things and start challenging myself. And one of those was I decided to go and sleep the night in a forest. And that's this picture right here where I eventually found myself in England. This is the New Forest. And I was searching through this forest to try and find a place to sleep the night in something called a bivvy. And this here is a bivvy, where it's just a waterproof sleeping bag. And to just spend the night alone with just my thoughts and meditate and just think about what has been taking place and just push myself a little bit further. And just before I closed closed the boot of my car, and I was about to turn my phone off and walk out to this forest. And I checked my phone one last time, the email, and I received a message from my son's school. And this was such a critical turning point, reading this message, where instead of it saying my first name, this was a message for my older son, my first name and my surname, at least his name and my surname. It had requested to change his surname to my ex-wife's surname. And this news was like a knife going into my stomach. And I realized I had to make even more of a dramatic change to my life. And so I went that night, spent the night in the forest, and just with these thoughts about what had taken place. This is where I met up with Gwyn and Mark, and in that kitchen, and just seeking for an alternative way of just a different path in life. One of the suggestions that came up at first was they'd recommended to go to volunteer my time at an event called Green and Away. And at this event, I was chopping wood and building shelves and helping out within this community of people that were organizing this event for the 7 or so days that I was there. It took place for about 3 months. And I met many people during this event, but one that really stood out in my mind, there was such a profound impact in my life, was this man here, Satish Kumar. And he was a wonderful man that I had only 2 conversations with. The first one was after a talk that I heard him sharing part of his journey that he went through in life, in the early stages of his life when he was a young boy living in New Delhi. And this was during the times of the nuclear arms race. And he wanted to do something about this, as he could see that this was not going to be a good course that man was taking with this race for nuclear weapons. And he was talking to his mentor, saying, this is not going to be good. And I want to do something about it, but I just don't know what. And his mentor said to him, Satish, you need to go and speak to the countries that have nuclear weapons or nuclear programs, and go and speak to them about your vision that you have. And he said, how can I do this? I'm just a young Indian boy. I've got no money. I've got nothing. How can I do this? How can I even get there? And so his mentor said to him, well, Satish, you need to walk, and you need to do it without any money. And so he went on a journey of 8,000 miles, which is nearly 10,000 kilometers, over a 2-year period. And it was a peace walk that he and a friend went on. And he walked all the way from New Delhi to Moscow, to Paris, to London, to Washington, and spoke to the leaders that had these nuclear weapons. And potentially he single-handedly had an impact on the course of mankind. So there I was after another event. We're sitting next to each other on 2 different hay bales. And I'd shared with him on the previous time that I'd met him part of my journey and the plan that I had to sell and give away everything that I owned and go down to a backpack and live a very different life, trying to discover what had taken place in my life and to see where life was going to take me. And I asked him, Satish, what is one bit of advice that you could give me? And he turned to me and said, Garry, you need to trust. And from that moment, I have been through so many different situations as part of that talk within Gwyn and Gwyn's kitchen, talking with my friend Mark and choosing a very different path in my life. And that path and the very first form of trust was to sell and give away everything that I owned. This was just prior to leaving my apartment, and I think 55 items that I took with me, I gave away and sold everything else that I owned. And looking at this list of items of 5 pairs of undies and 5 or 6 shirts, about the only thing that I've actually kept from all of these is my passport. And it's this journey has taken me to many different places, and I've discovered a little secret in life. And this is called controlled suffering that I put myself through. And it's things like doing improvised comedy, stand-up comedy, which as a young boy, I was the most introverted kid growing up. And I could never, just talking to people was a difficult thing, even in my, family members, cousins and aunts, and that was difficult for me to do. So doing stand-up comedy was extremely difficult, but it's something that I faced, and it's a short, intense pain that's not going to kill you, but you learn so much from that. And I've gone through so many different experiences like this, and it's something that is no longer part of our culture, doing far more intense things, like initiation ceremonies that young boys and girls would need to go through, of going out into the wilderness and having to survive for 2 weeks by themselves as they transition to adults. And so I've been stepping into this journey more and more along the way, along my journey. And I've discovered something called a Temescal, which is almost looks like a pizza oven for humans. And they, in the center of the structure, they bring in volcanic stones that have been heated up in the fire for a couple of hours. And this has been used as far back as the Aztecs, and who knows how far back from there. And it is a way, just before battles and after battles, to give the strength and cleanse the warriors before they go into battle and after battle. It's a way to clear and cleanse sickness. Women have labored during birth in one of these temescals. And I started the new year in one of these temescals on the first out here in Mexico. And it's takes place for about 2 hours. And when those volcanic stones get put in the center, the entrance gets closed. And there's sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 people that go into the structure, and you're sitting down. And you are taken through a journey of your ancestors and Mother Earth and its abuela or abuelo that guides through this process, sharing the story of our ancestors. And at first, for the first hour, it seems very manageable. I've done many temescal, many steam rooms, and I just thought this would be no problem to do. But for about the second hour, from hour to hour, the second hour is such intense suffering that I go through. I've done these a few times now. But every time when you come out of these, you just feel so grateful for just normal air. And it just makes you stronger. And there's little things that everybody is able to do, from cold showers to difficult things like just volunteer to do a public speaking event like this talk. There is so much that you'll learn about yourself when you push yourself way outside of your comfort zone. Another journey that I've been so grateful to experience was going to live in the Ecuadorian Amazon jungle with a tribe of hunters and gatherers. And this was very deep in the Amazon, where it took a plane to be able to get there. The alternative is walking for a couple of days to get to this community that have been living there. And fortunately, a little runway has been built within this community to be able to get there, and has been built by missionaries many years ago as a way to be able to get back and to this community and spread Christianity to this tribe. The experience of going down the river on dugout canoes and eating all sorts of food, that was, this community totally relies on hunter and gathering. And it's everything from frogs to snails to alligators to sloth and monkey. And it's just unbelievable amount of things that you would never normally experience eating in day-to-day life, and having one meal a day and living on just something called chicha beer, which is brewed from a yucca plant, and it's stamped, and it's basically a yucca plant. It's like a root that is cooked and put in these big pots, stamped, and then the woman of every household takes a handful of this, puts it in her mouth, chews it and spits it out, and that starts the fermentation process. And that is what most of this community lives on day to day, because you're unable to drink the water from that river. During our time there, we taught English in the little school. We helped within the community building exercise equipment with this was my good friend that we went to the community with. And the biggest lesson that I learned from all of this, I thought we would be there to help this community, and there'll be so much that we would share and teach them when we were there as Westerners coming into this community. And as part of our time there, we took a camera guy and had a drone and different camera equipment to capture this experience out there. But as part of our time out there, there is a lesson that we learned, that half of this community is desperately wanting to keep and hold on to their way of life, their hunter-gatherer way of life, their language, the Quechua that they speak there, and just the jungle, and not have roads and sell their land to the oil companies. We ended up forming part of this problem, this desire for the other half of this community, and that was to sell to the oil companies, to sell to the logging companies, so that there would be roads put in, that they'll have access to the Western way of life. And here I am flying a drone, and you can just see the intrigue of these little kids and this father of this drone. And it just created more of a desire for the Western way of life and wanting to live that way of life. And no matter what we would say, that their way of life was potentially better than ours, without all the cars, without all the stresses of money and everything else that we have as part of our life. But we brought part of that desire into this community. The further good that we did was we had set up a program as part of an SEO agency that I'd created with my friend who became a business partner, as a way to give back to this community and to try and support and guide them. We'd set up a program to clean up a lot of the impact that the West had brought to their community through that runway that had been created for the missionaries to gain access to this community, allowed the oil companies to come into this community and build a school. And with the school, they're now teaching the kids and the community about Western ideas and the value of money, so that they're able to offer them money for their community. So we're just, my friend and I were coming up with as many ways as we could to give this community a way to not only heal part of the damages that the Westerns had impacted this community, but also give them a bit of a purpose and a way of sustaining themselves while they're there. So we'd implemented this cleanup program, and you can see all the things that have been thrown into this river there for generations and generations. When their parents and grandparents ate a banana and threw the peel into the river, that completely disintegrated within a month, versus this that had been thrown away years and years ago is still there. And as part of this program that we had set up, we were educating them on how to look after their land and recycle. A further project that we had implemented was an anti-logging team that would patrol their land, their forests, and apprehend and stop anybody that would be cutting and selling their trees. So this is a group that had been caught cutting these trees down and has been stopped there. We've been featured on Forbes magazine about the work we were doing within this community. But I almost feel that we don't really understand, like I was saying before, that we're going in there, first of all, for an experience where we wanted to experience the Amazon jungle and their way of life, and to contribute and to share our understanding of things and to also learn from them. And to then set up these programs of the anti-logging. And we've also had a capture program where we capture some animals from the jungle. And instead of constantly hunting, to actually raise those animals and give the jungle some time for it to recover. But what happens if we ever stop one of these programs? They're so used to receiving some funding to be able to continue these programs. And when that funding ends, we haven't truly taught them how to be sustainable. So there's still so many lessons that are to be learned from how man just thinks. Like it's a lesson that I've learned to not think that you know better, to really be an observer more than trying to take what you think is best for somebody else. There is this observation that I've had, and I guess a saying that if there's a tree that is going to fall, it's a very old tree that's in a forest and it's dying through rot and it's going to fall over. There isn't a bird, there isn't another animal, there isn't an insect or creature that will ever stop that tree from falling over. Humans are about the only creature that ever stops something from falling over. And this could be a relationship that needs to end. This could be a job that needs to be let go of, or a company that needs to fail. And I have learned this lesson within my life, that when you let that tree fall, the most wonderful, incredible things happen in your life. And new life grows out of this space in the canopy of where that tree used to grow, and forms such beautiful life that you could never, ever imagine. I eventually ended up, through the difficult journeys that I went through, had the courage to be able to go and meet up with my ex-wife that I hadn't spoken to for about 2.5 years by the stage. And it felt like going to the small town that she was living in, where there were 60 family members, which was, it felt like I was going into a gladiator arena, to go back there and face her and try and build a bridge back into my boy's life. That first meeting, my boys weren't ready to be able to meet up with me, but 6 months later, they were. And that moment where it was I think a Thursday morning, early in the morning, that I had arranged to go and see them, and arrived there, and my son was waiting at the door to meet me. And we just walked up to each other as I got out of the taxi, and we just embraced each other. And it's when you've lost everything, and something that was so important to me, like my sons, and when you get them back, it is the most magical thing. My relationship with them is just so beautiful. Just being there with them whenever I can, although I still live often thousands of miles away from them, still discovering a different way of living my life. But I still have beautiful calls with them. And when I do get to spend with them, it's such beautiful quality time. And it's so, I remember receiving this. I had given a TEDx talk, and this was on a TEDx talk comment that I had seen a few years after reuniting with my sons. And it just reaffirmed just how, even though everything seemed like it had failed beyond repair, my relationship with my sons, that it is possible to, through letting in my life, letting that tree fall, and for a new life to sprout, and to have a relationship so much stronger with my kids than I could ever even imagined. And just to trust in the process of life. And this, I was reminded when I was sitting on my balcony in Colombia, and there was a plant called a bird of paradise, and it had these beautiful leaves. And I observed this over a 3 or 4 month period, how a new leaf would shoot out of the stem of the previous leaf, and it would start its life as this very tightly bound, almost spear of the leaf. I remember observing this, and it stayed in that way for maybe 2 or 3 weeks as it came out, as it started growing longer and longer. And I just thought, could I see if I could unwrap that leaf? And I tried to take a little bit of that leaf, and I ended up tearing it, and realized that as another 2 weeks went by and that leaf fully unfurled to be a perfectly formed leaf except for that little tear. And I can't believe on how many times that just a simple plant and looking to nature has been able to help not only myself to trust in nature. We so often forget that we are part of nature, and we are part of something so much greater than ourselves, that we try and force things, and we end up tearing that leaf instead of trusting in that process. And this very simple concept is something that I have shared with fathers that I work with now through a beautiful project that came out of my suffering that I went through. And this project is called 100K Fathers. And it's still at an early stage of life. But I've set this up as an organization to one day reunite 100,000 fathers to their kids. And through following the principles of nature and the lessons that I've learned within life, and it's been such a wonderful journey already. I must have spoken to maybe nearly 20 fathers so far. And there's one father here that I've been working with for only a very short period, but he ended up seeing his beautiful son and daughter, and they stayed with him for the first time ever for 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year. And I had a call with the two of them, a call with him, and he said, introduced me as this, come kids, this is the man that Daddy is helping. And he shared stories of this little boy, teaching him to wee standing up, because he's been brought up for all those years by his mother. And it snowed during Christmas, and they built the very first snowman together. And the grandfather, for the very first time, has been able to see his kids. And it's been the most profound experience, this, on how I'm able to just listen to these fathers, just to hear their story, to hear their suffering. And then somehow, through the lessons that I've learned, I'm able to slowly guide them to a path of trusting, to not tear that leaf, and to allow that leaf to be able to unfold by itself. And although I had created this project to help fathers, there's been mothers that have actually been reaching out to me. And 2 days ago, I spoke to a mother who's got 4 kids, and her 20-year-old daughter doesn't want to see her. And it's amazing on how I'm able to help her, and a father in Oman his 2 kids have been kidnapped from him. And I don't know where this journey is going to take me, but I am just going to trust, like that farmer did, of that horse running away, to just say and understand that everything that happens in life is a maybe. When you think your horse is going to run away, and you so mourn that horse like I did my 2 kids, you just never know what life is going to bring back to you. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd love to have those now. We can give it a minute of silence as well.
Garry, Mark would be so proud of you, man.
And thank you very much for sharing this journey here and so many times you have gave me the time, your valuable time to share me this story too. Thank you.
Pleasure, man.
Yeah, I just want to say that was so beautiful. I feel silenced, which is why I'm being silent. Maybe others feel the same. So it's not, it's just sinking in, if you see what I mean.
It's a very grateful feeling, this, to be able to share this story with all of you today. And
Garry, I've heard many parts of that story before, but for me, I love this idea of just letting the tree fall. This idea that you don't have to fix everything, you don't have to provide a solution, you don't have to save anything. Sometimes the right thing is just to let the tree fall. That's such a powerful concept and a beautiful statement. Thanks for that.
thank you.
I'll just say thank you as well for sharing your heart and your journey with all of us. That was a very, very cool story. I loved it, and I also loved the idea of letting the tree fall. And I think one of the coolest pictures that you showed was not the tree, but the picture following with the roots that had been built by a new tree over top of the old. And it just made me feel like you can keep to those roots, you can continue growing, and the old is kind of still there, but it builds and you've created a new tree, a new life from the old roots. But thank you. That was very, very amazing.
Thank you.
I would like to say that I've also when heard this story a couple of times, but today it was especially emotional for me too, and to hear you share this with your heart opened to all of us is just inspiring. And thank you, Garry Mamango, for keep inspiring the world with your presence.
Thank you, Andrea.
I just wanted to ask, as Garry's sister, how he decided which story to share. It's been a privilege being his sister and sharing so much of his journey with us along the way. So my question is, how did you decide which part of your journey to share in just 1 hour?
I let it unfold over a month, where I I just had a document open, and I just felt which photos and which it was purely guided by which images, and there was so much to share, but this each image just came to me as the right image. And I think in the past, whenever I've done talks, I've always ended up taking out so many slides, but this one, every single image that I added in was the right slide, the right image, and the right part of the story. All I can say is I just trusted. I just trusted that it was the right images and the right part of the story.
I would like to ask another question, because I did invite my cousins who are here, and I want to thank them. I said that you're going to tell the story to become a digital nomad, and because that's a very inspiring thing to do too, and especially more so for younger, although not exclusively for them, but could you share us a little bit of that?
Or becoming a digital nomad. It's
like how
did I?
How would you speak to the younger people on how to be able to just start, perhaps?
That's a beautiful question. For a younger person, I so highly recommend it. Is you've got no commitments. You've got no kids that you're responsible for. You've got so little to learn. And if you do fail, I don't believe there's any such thing as failure. The lessons you learn just from the people that you'd meet along this way, and what you learn about yourself by trusting, by taking that leap of faith and going out there, especially leaving, if you've been born in the same town or city and you haven't really seen much of the world, there is so much waiting for you. And if it doesn't work out, you're still young, you can start again. And even at whatever age, like I did this at 40, I've restarted my life a couple of times now. And it goes down to just trusting, and like that caterpillar who is building that cocoon, you just got no idea the butterfly that's going to emerge out of you in your life. You're either going to, if you don't trust, you're going to stay as a caterpillar, and all you're going to know is just eating leaves and existing with multiple legs and stuck to branches. But when you do take that leap, and you will go through this cocoon process, especially when things aren't working out in your life, and you will go through those times of darkness, but you just need to trust in life's process of the changes that you're going through and what's going to be emerging on the other side of that. So I cannot recommend it enough to just trust and take that leap and just experience have conversations with people from another country if you can, and eat their food and struggle and suffer a little. Like we don't give enough credit to suffering and difficulty. There is just something so beautiful, important about that. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'd say if you have an opportunity, and don't wait till it's perfect. There's no such thing as having enough money to be able to do it. Like my experience in the Amazon jungle there, where even though chartering an airplane and having a film guy and having all of that cost me less than it cost me half of my living expenses. going to live there for a month and renting an apartment somewhere and having food and groceries and all the rest. There is so much life that exists out there for far less than you can ever imagine. And just trust. Go for it, Amen.
Oh, I wanted to ask, how different is a two-part questions? Obviously, is might be a bit personal question, but it was, how was it the different for your kids before your journey and after your journey? The presence of the metaphor you had from one type of father figure to another type of father figure that you are now. What was the difference for them? And also how, obviously, Gwyn always tell me and teach me toward elderhood, how elderhood is important. The second part of the question, how the first part was your children, how different was for them first, before you change and after you change. And the second was going a bit how young kids, me myself was blessed with a great father, but the kids who at the moment in the society, it's harder for them to find the right father figure or finding the right feminine mother figure in their life. What would be your bit of advice to them?
I'm clear on your first question. Your second question around elderhood, could you expand upon that a little bit further in terms of the advice on how to bring elders into their life, or for them to learn from the elders?
Yes, like the idea of you do not have to rely on one masculine figure or one father figure in your life. There are many, like myself. I learned from you, I learned from Gwyn as much as I learned from my own father.
Yes.
It's how is the best way for younger generation to go into the journey of trusting the elderhood and who to trust as both father figure and feminine mother figure energy.
Got you.
If you don't have that, some kids doesn't have that in their life. Yeah.
Yes, I understand. So answer the first part of that question. How different was it for my kids and for myself as well as a father? Is so profoundly different. Because I didn't have the tools, I don't think, to be able to properly guide my kids. I hadn't gone through, although I'd been through some struggles in life, the tools that I've got access now to be able to allow my kids to fail and know that they're going to fail in something that they're on a pathway doing something and they're talking about it, and you so know that they're going to fail. Previous version of me would try and stop them from experiencing that pain and that suffering. And it's also suffering that you as a parent will feel if that kid fails. And I would always stop them from, you stopping a kid from falling, and it's reminds me of an analogy as well, as when a child is learning to walk, that child falls over hundreds of times. But we don't, after the third time of them falling over, put them in a wheelchair to try and protect them from falling over. we allow them to fall over and to learn the lessons. And it is a form of suffering that they go through, but without that, they'll never learn to walk. But we forget that as adults, as they get bigger, to allow them to fail and to allow them to go through that suffering. So that is being probably the biggest change that I've made in how I father my kids, is to see the things that they share with me of events that are going to take place, suffering they're going to experience, and allow them to experience that and to be there to hear them and hear their suffering, and to be there as a parent and a lighthouse for them, to say, to be okay, you'll make it through this. Don't try and solve it for them, but allow them to be able to make it through this. In terms of the other role models, and for my kids, there are a handful of elders that I've introduced into my kids' lives. And this is after I've formed a deep form of trust with those. And for my older son, who's massively into cars, there's a friend that I've known for many years that has built his own car and has got a garage with lots of tools and a workshop there, and is a very practical and solid man, and is now a father of 2 kids. And just through support and guidance over WhatsApp, is able to, through a group chat, is able to answer and give a different form of advice than what I would as a father. And often a child is going to listen far more to somebody that they respect and look up to. Kids don't take their parents for granted up until they're maybe 30 or 40. I think I only truly thank my father and mom, who are on this call right now, maybe 2 years ago. And it's like, thank you so much for what you did for me and for the childhood that I had. And for those of you that aren't parents and you have kids, you just need to be patient and don't tear that leaf and try and expect your kids to be grateful for everything that you do for you. Know that when they're older and that event that takes place of a horse running away in their life, that you will just be able to be there for them if you can. And that they'll be able to make it through that, and that your kids will appreciate what you've done later on in life. That when they go through events in their life, they will understand what you went through as a parent. So it's a game of a lot of patience as a parent. So the second part of your question there is part of it's so important that masculine and feminine energy for a woman, for a child. It's like I had this initial goal of just reuniting fathers to their kids. But after working with some others now, I realize it's the equal importance having that feminine energy as there is that masculine energy. And so when I guide them, it's not like most advice that fathers receive, and that's to go to courts and to try and fight this with force, but to rather trust in the process and change your own understanding of life and go through that controlled suffering within your own life to understand life a little bit more and to be a better guide for your kids when you do get to see them. And it's the lessons you can learn and your kids can learn from elders is so important. I'm understanding more and more and more that there is a reason why that Temescal is guided by an elder. They have got so much wisdom, and it feels like life is going through a cycle where kids used to respect their elders. And in the Native American traditions and indigenous tribes, they've always respected their elders. Modern day kids don't, but that is slowly changing. And I would love to be part of that change, is to allow younger people to understand the importance of their elders. And the elders from both a feminine and masculine perspective. I don't know if that answers your question, Amin.
That was great. Thank you. That was awesome.
I'm just conscious of time. I don't want to stop this by any means, but I'm just doing a time check. We have run over. There may be more questions, and everyone may be happy to stay on, and people can leave anytime they want. So I just wanted to raise that now.
I just want to make a couple of remarks before I need to go, but as Helen says, we can leave this channel open because I'm sure the silence means there's lots of questions just percolating there waiting to come out. I don't know how it appears on your screen, folks, but on my screen, Garry is next to his parents. And I just want to thank them for bringing up Garry and giving us this wonderful man. And his sister's there. I know his brother was on the call earlier, but yeah, as they say, you know, it takes a village to bring up a parent, a person. And I think, you know, you've got to take a lot of credit for what we've heard today. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
I would just like to say thank you for being there at that critical point, you know, in Garry's life. That you were one of the mentors that were meant to be in his life, you know, that guided him along. So we're just so grateful, you know, for all the people that he's met along the way. It's been the most exciting, amazing adventure to travel along with Garry and to see the way the caterpillar has become the butterfly and to see the most wonderful workings out in reuniting with his children, and for us also to have contact with our 2 grandsons. So it's been a wonderful adventure for us too. So thank you everyone who's been part of Garry's life as well.
Thank you, Mom.
That was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad.
I'm just going to leave on one more remark. When Garry created that website for us 2 or 3 years ago, he sat with me and Mike Seidler, who was the founder of ASP, and Mike and I have this role that we call we're the keepers of the soul of ASP, and there's the body of ASP, which is all the mechanical stuff. But Garry's always maintained he knew nothing about sustainability, and I've passionately believed that was wrong. I didn't know how to explain it to him. That website, when he showed it to us, just blew us away because he had somehow understood what the soul of ASP was and managed to express it digitally. It's stood the test of time. We've had it 3 or 4 years now, and it's lifelong. We took the step this year of making Garry an honorary member of ASP for life for his contribution to it. And today I just understood why we made that decision. Yeah, he knows more about sustainability than everyone else I know put together. And it sums up what Mike Seidler believed when he set this up. And I think Helen was around also at the beginning of the ASP, that it's for practitioners. It's not about professionals, people that get paid for doing this job. It's for people that live it and breathe it, people that want to nurture the planet and nurture society so it can nurture them. And I think, you know, going back to some of the phrases we've heard today, you know, Garry speaks from his heart. And as I've said about tough conversations, it takes love to speak the truth and it takes courage to hear it. And this is epitomized that beautifully. So thank you, Garry. Thank you all the Junkuhns who have been on the call today. Thank you, Amin, for your questions, and Helen for all your work putting this together. And I thank each and every one of you for being here tonight to be part of this. This has been a really unique experience for me. I've never experienced anything like this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, everybody.
Garry?
Say it quickly.
Esther.
Oh, hi, Garry. I really, really want to thank you for sharing this. It's very touching.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a gift and it's so inspiring. Even though I'm close to Andrea, I didn't know all this, and I thank you and for the invitation, and I hope we're going to be in contact. there were some of your words that were really deep down. Thank you.
The mummy. Is that her mother?
Who's?
Andrea's mother.
That's the aunt.
I'm the aunt.
Oh, you're the aunt.
Yes. I'm Andrea's aunt.
Oh, is it up?
You must say something.
Oh.
Say something.
We can hear you. Mum and Dad.
Andrea, sorry, is that your aunt? Are you Andrea's aunt?
Yes. Hello. Nice
Happy
to meet you.
you.
Happy to meet you.
Andrea's mom's on the call. It's Josephina.
Yes. Andrew. Yes. Exactly.
Say hi, mommy.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
That's my mom.
I'm Andrea's mom. I'm very
hello,
happy to be here. Hello, Angela. I'm very glad to meet you. Thank you, Garry. I wrote some things because I wasn't able to speak too much. But thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, I've saved the chat, so you can see that, Garry. I know it's very hard to look at chat and field questions and do all these things, so we do have that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, where each person is currently now, in which country? I assume when you're in the UK. Okay. And Andrea and you and Garry in Mexico. Josephina, okay. Is Esther, you're in Mexico?
No, I wish. I'm in Canada.
I'd love to hear where everybody is from or where they are now.
I think I'll go around and try and point out some people that I know. Karen, they're in the UK. I said they've just dropped off. Min is in the UK. Elizabeth is in Atlanta in the US. And then Andrea, of course, she's here. And Andrea's mom. And Yves.
Yep. I'm going to go as well. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Garry.
Yes, I'm going to need to go as well. My internet just dropped out as well, which is very timely.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Garry. Thanks, everybody.